This is CBN NewsWatch.
Thank you so much for joining us. It is Friday, August 14th. I'm Ephraim Graham. I want to begin this half hour with an historic agreement that represents a major shift in the Middle East. For the first time in more than a quarter of a century, President Donald Trump announced a peace deal between Israel and the United Arab Emirates.
Here's Israel and the United Arab Emirates will fully normalize their diplomatic relations. They will exchange embassies and ambassadors and begin cooperation across the board and on a broad range of areas, including tourism, education, healthcare, trade, and security. This is a truly historic moment.
The agreement is known as the Abraham Accord, and it's been 26 years since Israel signed a peace deal with Jordan in 1994, and more than 40 years since they agreed to a peace with Egypt back in 1979. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu hailed it as a new era of peace.
Together, we'll transform the region and forge an even better future for our people. This is a future of peace, a future of security, and a future of prosperity. I've always believed that we could establish peace with the Arab world, and I've been working towards that lofty goal for decades.
And CBN News Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell is joining us now with more on this. So, Chris, as part of the agreement, Israel will suspend its plans to annex parts of the West Bank. What has been the response from the Palestinians and from some of the Jewish leaders in Judea and Samaria?
Well, Ephraim, some of the Palestinians feel it's a betrayal. They reject this outright. Hamas and the Palestinian Authority, they believe like it's one Arab country that's going against what had been for years an Arab peace proposal. Among Jewish leaders, I would say it's mixed right now. One Jewish leader in Judea and Samaria called this the fraud of the century as opposed to the deal of the century. Others, like one of the mayors we have interviewed before from Efrat, say it's actually a price worth paying. And I would add that some of the evangelicals, who support President Trump might even think this is too high a price because it puts sovereignty on hold. And that's what Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said in his statement, that sovereignty, this idea of declaring Israeli law over parts of Judea and Samaria, was still on his agenda, and that he would not give up Israel's right to the land.
Chris, why are some calling this Iran's worst nightmare?
Well, what it does, Ephraim, it actually breaks the hold of the Sunni Arab countries to forge relationship with Israel. And let me explain, because Iran is the enemy not only of Israel, but many of these Sunni Arab nations throughout the Gulf region and parts of North Africa. And the reason for that is because there is such a division between the Sunnis and the Shiites. The Shiites are represented by Iran. The Sunnis are many of the other Arab nations like Saudi Arabia. One of the things really to watch for right now, Ephraim, is whether or not Saudi Arabia would actually be one of the next countries. There's talk about Bahrain, Oman, even Morocco, but Saudi Arabia would be the last one. And what it does actually, Ephraim, is now they're recognizing Israel as a friend, not a foe, here in the Middle East.
So, Chris, what do you think this means for the president going into the elections?
Actually, I think it's going to help him. How can a Democrat, whether it's Biden and Harris, or criticize a peace deal here in the Middle East that actually will bring peace, possibly in a historic way? We talked to Joe Rosenberg earlier today, and he said that this particular peace deal might be much warmer, much more friendly than the relationships between Jordan and Israel. Part of that reason is that there's never been a war between Israel and the United Arab Emirates, as well as many of the Arab nations there on the peninsula. So I think it could be the beginning, like it says at the end of the movie Casablanca, the beginning of a beautiful friendship. They're talking about trade, tourism, many other things that they don't necessarily talk about with Egypt, Jordan. This could be a breakthrough in the Middle East.
Chris, real quick before we let you go, what do you have in store for us on Jerusalem Dateline this week?
Well, we'll have more about this historic peace deal. We'll actually have a story, Ephraim, about what really happened in Beirut. I mean, it's hard to imagine, this sort of overshadows that catastrophe in Beirut. What really happened? Many people believe it could have been Hezbollah, an arms depot that really was part of that huge explosion. And also, we're having something about the Iran-China Accord. They're actually spelling an agreement that could spell trouble for the Middle East. And finally, Ephraim, we have a story about the 20th anniversary of the CBN News Bureau here in Jerusalem. August 17th, next Monday, marks 20 years since I came here with my wife and 3 children to begin the News Bureau. And here we are 20 years later.
Worthy of celebration indeed. I want to remind you at home that you can catch Jerusalem Dateline this evening with Chris on the CBN News Channel. It begins at 9:30 Eastern. The pandemic is taking center stage on the campaign trail as the debate over schools opening their doors heats up as Joe Biden is now proposing that everyone wear a face mask. CBN White House correspondent Ben Kennedy has the story.
Joe Biden calls on Americans to be a patriot and do their part to stop the spread of the virus by urging state governors mandate mandatory mask wearing.
Protect your fellow citizens. Step up. Do the right thing. Do the right thing.
The former VP cites health experts' predictions that wearing a mask could save 40,000 lives.
Every single American should be wearing a mask when they're outside for the next 3 months at a minimum. Every governor should mandate mandatory mask wearing.
President Trump pushed back on the proposal, telling Biden to stop playing politics with the virus and saying the mask decision is up to the governors.
He does not identify what authority the president has to issue such a mandate or how federal law enforcement could possibly enforce it, or why we would be stepping on governors throughout our country, many of whom have done a very good job, and they know what is needed.
The big question for many parents, what is needed to reopen schools this fall? Dr. Anthony Fauci says communities should have a positivity rate below 10% before they do. The American Academy of Pediatrics suggests all kids over the age of 2 wear cloth face coverings, comparing it to seatbelts and helmets.
We don't want the schools shut down. We want the schools to open, and especially very young children handle it, all children, but especially very young children handle it very well.
As for the debate over masks, according to AARP, right now there are 34 states with mandatory mask orders, with signs posted outside restaurants, stores, and even workplaces requiring people wear them. Ben Kennedy, CBN News.
Health experts warn the current pandemic with the upcoming flu season could spell disaster for Americans. According to an interview with WebMD, CDC Director Robert Redfield says it all depends on how consistently people wear masks, stay 6 feet apart, and wash their hands. The CDC is now projecting there could be nearly 189,000 COVID deaths by September 5th. Researchers are also predicting Chicago, Boston, and Baltimore could be the next hotspots. A nonprofit with the goal of preventing veterans from taking their own lives has expanded its mission. Collateral Damage Project is now also helping frontline medical workers and first responders during the COVID-19 pandemic. Mark Martin is on this story.
So the red color that we're seeing here on the sides of the brain basically are telling you that this person has an overactive mind, maybe an aggressive disorder of some sort?
Well, they would have some emotional dysregulation, some aggressive type tendencies.
When CBN News first interviewed clinical psychologist Dr. Timothy Barclay, we talked about his passion to keep veterans from harming themselves.
What can I do to really treat the population that I'm truly passionate about, but without giving these services away and going bankrupt in the process? It was like a light bulb that went off. Well, the only way to really do that effectively is through a nonprofit organization, and to raise funds and to do what we do here in private practice, but to offer that to veterans.
That led to the Collateral Damage Project, which helps vets battling post-traumatic stress, brain injury, and depression. And that's not all. Now, because of the coronavirus pandemic, Collateral Damage Project also is offering free treatment for frontline medical workers and first responders.
Well, the treatment that we're offering for the first responders and medical workers, it doesn't use all of the research-based techniques and non-invasive brain stimulation and imaging that we do for the veterans with traumatic brain injury and things like that. Because mainly with first responders, we're going to be dealing with some stress, anxiety, acute stress, insomnia in the majority of cases.
Barclay felt his organization needed to meet a great need. Work
overload added to the stress and anxiety of just being overworked, but then also the additional concerns of for their own health and their own safety, and not only for themselves, but what they're bringing home to their families.
Collateral Damage Project is offering in-person therapy for Central Virginia residents and teletherapy for first responders and healthcare workers living outside the area. Barclay says each individual gets up to 3 free sessions.
So we just wanted to offer some relief to those frontline workers and give them a place to vent, learn some self-care strategies, because they just give and give and give. And sometimes at the neglect of their own personal well-being, which can open the floodgates to depression, anxiety, and insomnia. We just want to give them an avenue to help offset that.
An avenue to find peace in stressful times. Mark Martin, CBN News.
Coming up, unknown valor, 75 years after one of the most critical battles of World War II. Martha McCallum shares the stories of the unsung heroes. What family mystery does she uncover along the way? We're going to answer that question right after this.
Hey, if you're tired and exhausted all day, you can't think clearly, and you really just need a cup or even a pot of coffee to get through your day, then join me, Dr. Josh Axe, for this new series where I'm going to teach you how to transform your diet and use essential oils and supplements to get a better night's sleep.
Wake up to your best life. Call 1-800-700-7000 to get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep today.
It's about the competition.
I kind of put that pressure on myself, and I think people had expectations.
It's about overcoming.
We use this phrase all the time, keep chopping, keep practicing hard.
It's about going the distance.
I think as a father, it's my job, to lead. Just be the best husband and father I can be.
Watch Going the Distance with Sean Brown Saturday night at 7:30 on the CBN News Channel.
Orphans Promise is committed to loving and serving at-risk children, to helping keep families together, and to creating opportunities for strong and sustainable communities around the world. We're working in over 60 countries around the world, and with your help, we can do even more. There's an old African proverb I love that says, if you want to run fast, run alone. But if you want to run far, run together. At Orphans Promise, we want to run far so we can touch the lives of as many orphaned and vulnerable children as possible. But we don't want to go alone. We're out to change the world, one child, one family, one community at a time. Will you join us?
This week marks the 75th anniversary of America's victory over Japan in World War II. In honor of those who served in the South Pacific during the war, Fox News anchor Martha McCallum recently published a book called Unknown Valor. It is the story of those who fought and died in the battle for Iwo Jima, including an uncle Martha never knew she had. CBN's Jenna Browder has the story.
We're going to obviously come back to this live.
Martha McCallum, host of The Story on Fox News.
The ongoing feud between President Trump and Nancy Pelosi boiling over today.
Knows how to tell a story. Each night interviewing guests from politicians and heads of state to everyone else in between.
What's the impact on the economy and also potentially on your reelection?
And now she's telling her own. Unknown Valor, a story of family, courage, and sacrifice from Pearl Harbor to Iwo Jima. It's the story of these men right here who sacrificed everything at Iwo Jima, one of the bloodiest and most brutal battles of World War II. And for Martha, it's deeply personal. Who is Private Harry Gray?
He was my mother's first cousin. His sister is still alive, Nancy Gray, and she's my Aunt Nancy, so, you know, he would have been my Uncle Harry.
At 18, Harry left home and enlisted in the Marines.
Obviously, his family was concerned. He was very young. His mom wanted him to finish high school, and so he did that for her. But as soon as he graduated, he was off to Parris Island in South Carolina for training, and then to the West Coast, and then on the USS Rochambeau across the ocean to Guam, and ultimately to Iwo Jima.
Martha skillfully weaves his story and more than a handful of others who served on the island, together with the history of the war on the Pacific Front. She says her fascination with Harry started when she was young. What kind of stories did you hear about Harry, your Uncle Harry, when you were growing up?
Well, my mother shared his letters with us when I was a teenager, and I remember reading them and I just started crying. They were so moving to me, and I wanted to know more about him and about his life. And then when I started writing the book, I got to a whole nother level because my Aunt Nancy and I sat down and we spoke for hours and I interviewed her.
And that was just the start of her research. You went to Iwo Jima yourself in researching and writing this book. What was that like actually being there?
It was extraordinary, and I knew that I had to go there in order to tell the story accurately, to walk on the island. The island is small, it's only 8 miles square, and it was loaded with 60,000 U.S. Marines and 20 to 30 to 40,000 Japanese soldiers who were mostly in the island. They had dug 11 miles of tunnels. So we got to see some of those caves and those tunnels. I climbed Mount Suribachi where the flag was raised and looked down at the black beaches, and we climbed up the beaches, which are black volcanic sand, and they're hard to climb up those terraces. And so I climbed them with, you know, jeans and a shirt on, not with a rifle or a pack on my back, and certainly not under fire. And it was difficult just under those circumstances. So it gave me a real sense of, you know, just how hard it was to fight on that island. It was a brutal, brutal battle, and so many people lost their lives.
Including Harry Gray, who died in a nighttime mortar attack. With the constant fear of death looming large over these men, Harry and many on the island turned to their faith.
One of the most moving things that I found that I didn't know existed was Harry's wallet, which was in his front pocket when he was killed. And there were bloodstains on that. There were pictures of his family. And then there was this little tiny prayer book. And in the back of it, he had written in his own handwriting this beautiful prayer, which basically said, you know, watch over me, but whatever is your will is what will happen. And I, you know, pray that you'll watch over me. And just to think of this 18-year-old, you know, writing this beautifully written, painstakingly lettered prayer and making sure that it was with him in his pocket was really moving to me. And I thought it was fascinating that there were 19 Catholic priests who were on the island and that they were giving communion sometimes 4, sometimes 5 times a day. These men were asking for it, these Marines on Iwo Jima, and knowing that they could die any minute. So there's a real presence of God in this story that was kind of unfolded to me in a very, you know, sort of real way as I learned about them and their faith.
Even though Harry didn't survive the war, his legacy lives on.
My son Harry is my youngest, and I named him with Harry Gray in mind. He's roughly the same age now that Harry was at that time, and I hope that this book will be a legacy for him and for all my kids and for other people too, because my feeling is that, you know, it's not just a story about Harry Gray, it's a story that so many families across this country have a Harry Gray, have someone that they lost who is not, you know, sort of, you know, someone who earned many medals or was a hero that everyone's aware of, but just an everyday Marine who gave everything for our country.
The Battle of Iwo Jima lasted 5 weeks. In all, close to 7,000 men lost their lives. But because of those like Harry Gray who gave their all, the United States won the battle and ultimately the war. In Washington, Jenna Browder, CBN News.
Still ahead, the Big Ten and Pac-12 cancel college football, but could other athletic conferences follow suit? CBN Sports Director Sean Brown is joining us to talk about that and more next.
Life is better with a good night's sleep. Get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep today.
I'm Ephraim Graham, and this is Studio 5. Cruise with me as I discover the good things happening in the world of music, sports, television, and movies.
The fact that Ryan Coogler was going to be directing the film, I knew that something special was going to happen.
We'll chat with artists at the forefront of entertainment and explore the connection between popular culture and faith.
I asked my pastor, I said, well, does that mean I'm supposed to be a preacher? He says, well, no, you already have a pulpit.
Watch Studio 5 Wednesday night at 9:30.
Remember for a moment what it was like to be a child. You believed every story you were told. You saw a world full of endless possibilities. What stories will the world's orphaned and at-risk children believe? We believe the Bible tells the only story truly worth believing. We believe that every child should have the opportunity to dream, the chance to take challenges and turn them into possibilities, the chance to stand on the promises of God, to recognize their place in the greatest story ever told. They have their whole lives ahead of them. Theirs is a world of endless possibilities. They are looking for a story to believe. We will tell them that story. Will you join us?
Depending on who you watch, you could spend Saturdays without college football. The Big Ten and Pac-12 announced earlier this week the cancellation of all sports competitions through the end of the year because of concerns over the COVID pandemic outbreak that we are seeing. Here to share more is Sports Director Sean Brown. So, Sean, we know the Big Ten and Pac-12 will not be playing football this season, but how likely is it that the other conferences will also cancel their fall sports?
Good morning, Ephraim. Well, first of all, it's very likely when you look at the roster size of these college football teams, you're talking about roster sizes between 60 and 90 players, some even more depending on the program. And when you're trying to put that many players into a bubble, it's just going to be proved to be very difficult. You look at programs like UCLA, who recently, it was recently reported that they had 8 players that tested positive for COVID-19. And so if you've got 8 players, soon that could be 16, and then exponentially, it could just run through a program and then other programs if they come in contact. And so it's very hard to contain that many players. And so it's very likely that, you know, a lot of programs will follow suit, and they should. You don't want to be the program that didn't, or the conference that didn't. They play football, and these players end up becoming ill because of it. And so it's very likely that all programs will begin. Just start looking towards the spring for spring football.
Yeah, with many students not even returning to campus, makes sense. The conferences are leaning toward opening up the sport in the spring. What would that look like?
You know what, I would imagine because of all the other spring sports, they would have to reduce the number of games that are played. Now, what that's going to look like in terms of games and conferences and interconference play, which may not happen. If they do conduct spring sports, it may just be within a conference. They're meeting right now. Presidents are talking to school presidents. School presidents are talking to the coaching staff to try to figure out if this will actually work. Programs like the Big Ten are already at work trying to figure out exactly what that would look like. And as the weeks progress, we'll begin to get more detail if it's even possible to do in conjunction with the other spring sports. But it's very likely, and hopefully they can make it work.
Yeah, indeed. You'll be watching for that as well. Tell us what you have lined up this weekend on Going the Distance.
You know, I have an interesting story, Ephraim, with water skier Christy Overton Johnson, who was a professional water skier for years. She had everything. And then even on that platform, she just felt empty. And so she's sharing that story with us this Saturday, which airs at 6:30 on Saturday. 7:30 on Saturdays, 6:30 on Sundays on the CBN News Channel.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And as you just heard, Going the Distance airs this weekend on the CBN News Channel. Sean said Saturday 6:30, Sunday 7:30, both Eastern Standard Time. Thank you so much for joining us and watching. We'll be right back. Coming up, hear how a Holy Spirit hunch led this man to save the lives of his church members. This is a story you don't want to miss. Stay with us.
Daddy?
Yeah, buddy.
How many nickels are in $1?
there are 20 nickels in a dollar.
How do birds fly? Does milk really make my bones stronger?
Yeah.
Daddy, when we die, will we go to heaven?
Do you have the answer to life's biggest question? Call the 700 Club. We'll help you find answers to the important questions life brings your way.
Watch breaking news, in-depth exclusive stories and programs from health to entertainment you won't find anywhere else. The CBN News Channel, a perspective you can trust. Enjoy credible news reporting from around the world. Discover inspiring programs and stories of hope, all in one place from a Christian perspective. The CBN News Channel, a perspective you can trust. To watch the CBN News Channel, download the app or visit cbnnewschannel.com.
Hello, I'm Dr. David Perlmutter, board-certified neurologist and #1 New York Times bestselling author. Wouldn't it be great to boost your energy, eliminate brain fog, and even reverse brain disease? Well, you can, and I'm going to show you how, along with some of the world's most well-respected brain experts in this DVD, Protect Your Brain.
Get Protect Your Brain, a free DVD only from the Christian Broadcasting Network, featuring experts on the cutting edge of neuroscience and brain health.
No matter how many times you've failed in the past, you really can do this.
In Protect Your Brain, you'll discover simple strategies to keep your brain young and healthy. Improve your memory. Discover the gut-brain connection. In Protect Your Brain, get your free copy at cbn.com or call 1-800-700-7000.
If you want to improve the quality of your life, get the DVD Protect Your Brain and get it today.
A Holy Spirit hunch may have saved many lives in the wake of that horrific explosion in Beirut. A pastor said that at the Center of Life Church, he told CBN's Wendy Griffith he sent his entire staff and scores of children home the day of the blast because he sensed something very bad was about to happen.
As if the Holy Spirit say, go, 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 go. So I was saying, everybody, go, go, go home, go home, go home, pushing them, turn off the computers, forcing them to leave. I was forcing them. And they said, we are cooking. We need to distribute food for refugees and for the poor. I said, today, cancel everything, put it in the fridge. So they were thinking I lost my mind. But they didn't know, and I didn't know, this is the Holy Spirit prompting.
That's Pastor Saeed Deeb of Life Center Church in Beirut, which sits only about a mile from the explosion epicenter. He says the blast blew out windows and doors and would have surely taken lives. More than 200 people lost their lives in that explosion. Thousands were injured, and even more are now without homes. Time now for your Friday Faithful, and today I leave you with this thought. There are lyrics from a song that's been playing in my head for the last few hours. Have a little talk with Jesus. Tell him all about our troubles. He'll hear our faintest cry, and he will answer by and by. Here's the bottom line you will find. Just a little talk with Jesus makes it right. With that word, make this a fabulous Friday, and be sure that you have a wonderful weekend. That is going to do it for this edition of CBN NewsWatch. We thank you so much for watching. I want to remind you, you can always watch our programs on the CBN News Channel. You can find them there at any time. You can also find them online at cbnnews.com. We'd love to know what you think about the stories you've seen here today or any day. You can email us at the address right there on your screen, newswatch@cbn.com. And of course, you can always reach out and touch us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Hope you'll join us again right here next time. Again, make it a fabulous Friday.